Hello all, I'm Patrick Roach from Inedo. Thanks for attending. As a note, we'll be recording this webinar, and to ensure audio quality, all attendees will be muted. If you would like to submit questions, either for the Q&A or otherwise, please use the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar sidebar. We will follow up during the presentation. Today, we'll be discussing both the basic functionality of Otter, as well as reviewing ideas on how to introduce Otter to your workplace. Otter is an infrastructure automation tool designed for Windows that utilizes infrastructure as code to define and manage server configurations. Otter focuses on two main areas of functionality. Configuration automation. Otter allows users to model the configuration of servers, roles, and environments, monitor for drift, schedule changes, and ensure consistency across servers. The other main area of Otter functionality is orchestration automation. Otter can spin up cloud servers, build containers, deploy packages, patch servers, or any other multi-server service automation. Otter's web-based UI lets you quickly review the status and plans for all of your servers at a glance. It lets users handle server configuration through a drag and drop editor and a code or text mode that users can switch between without hassle. You'll see more of that during the demo. Our presenter, Mark Johnson, is a software architect with SureID, a provider of high-assurance identity management programs and services. He designs and builds systems based on loosely coupled services to enable enterprise-level scale-out practices, following a service-oriented architectural style. He believes in the continuous deployment strategy should be well-tuned and fully automated. He is an ardent advocate for implementing a clean and organized infrastructure as code strategy for managing systems and infrastructure for both initial provisioning and drift remediation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mark, and he's going to begin the actual presentation. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate that. So yes, today we're going to talk about Windows infrastructure configuration and management with Otter, and how we use Otter at SureID to manage our build infrastructure and other areas, other types of servers as well. So the Otter is broken up into several different main areas. The first class object in the Otter system are servers. So servers are, they represent the physical or virtual server. Generally, we're working with virtual servers. That's most common, but we run them on physicals as well. For developer systems, we might have an Otter agent on a developer system to pre-pave developer tooling, things of that nature. The servers can either run an Otter agent or they can run agentless, which would be either SSH or PowerShell remoting. We run mostly with the agent mode using the Otter, built-in Otter agent. The agent supports two modes of security, SSH for communication, which requires a certificate, or a shared AES-256 key to authorize the agents. We use the AES-256 key just for simplicity. The servers monitor configuration drift. There's three different modes. There's report only. They can automatically remediate, so any changes detected, it would automatically fix that change, or there's just take no action. All servers can have a configuration plan. So a configuration plan is basically sort of the list of how it's configured, and that's done using what's called Otter script, which is just a higher level sort of orchestration script. Roles are another key component. They are associated to servers. So with roles, you're going to define what roles a particular server has. It helps you classify servers and to break up your configuration plans and your orchestration within the roles. So the roles can have a configuration plan as well. And the configuration plans for a role are applied to all associated servers to that role. Roles can also define or redefine variables from a higher scope. We'll talk a little bit more about variables and scoping a little bit later. Roles can also be directly associated with a raft. Raft is not a concept we're going to cover too much today, but basically a raft is where your assets are stored, and there's different types of rafts that we'll talk about. There's also a concept of environments. Environments are associated to roles. They can define or redefine variables from a higher scope. So you basically, the order of scoping is going to be global, environments, roles, server. They do not have configuration plans. So they're pretty much an organizational element that allows you to break up your system. As you see in this picture here, you can have a hierarchy of environments. You could do QA, you could do staging, you could maybe have child environments, as you see in the product, as a prod main, prod backup. Plans. So there's two types of plans. There's an orchestration plan. Those can be executed manually. An example might be if you want to do a one-off deployment, if you had to deploy something once every 2 weeks, or if there's just a particular operation you need to do once and only once to some servers. Maybe there's some tweak you needed to do to make a particular fix. You might do it there. They can also be executed on a schedule or a recurring basis. So you could say execute this orchestration tomorrow at noon, or you could say run this orchestration every night at 2 a.m. We use a recurring orchestration to detect whether servers need rebooting. Sometimes Windows updates will put a server into a state needing reboots. This helps us to be proactive about rebooting our servers. There's also configuration plans. Basically, configuration plans are what is defined in the server or the server roles, and those are continuously executed on a recurring basis. By default, out of the box, Otter executes every 60 minutes the configuration plans for roles and servers. That can be tuned to how you would like it. And there's also jobs. These can be, you can have a one-off job, so basically saying run a job now, and you can do a one-off for a configuration. So you might say I want to do a one-off for this particular server right now, or for a specific orchestration plan. You can target servers, roles, and/or environments. And then you can have recurring jobs, which I talked about previously. Another way, thing you might want to use jobs for, a scheduled job would be for maybe a heavyweight software installation. We use it for things like we need to install SQL Server or Visual Studio upgrade to a set of servers. It might be good to do that in the middle of the night or something when the build servers don't have high demand. And then variables. So we use the variables that heavily for storing configuration data, things that change. For lists of package identifiers for Chocolatey or NPM packages, PowerShell. It's very good for URLs that might change, other things like that. Again, here's the scopes that I talked about: global, environments, server roles, server, and that's the hierarchy. So at any lower level, you can override the higher level, and then ultimately you have a runtime. You can define variables in the plans themselves. Assets. So assets are a key component of Otter. They allow you to customize Otter. There's things, you have scripts, which are PowerShell scripts and Bash scripts. We use a lot of custom PowerShell script assets. We have quite a large library of those. And templates. I think templates are really great for reusing subplans. So you can reuse, if you have a more complex subplan, that you want to use in different roles, this allows you to abstract that away and define a template. And templates can take input parameters as well, so that you can really make them very generic for reuse. We use those fairly heavily as well. And then files, you can store files in Otter, and they're stored in the Raft. And those are good for storing binary files, configuration files. For instance, an example would be we deploy some custom Team City plugins, and so those are binaries, and we just put them into Otter, and that makes it real easy to ensure that we always have the precise version we want. Configuration files are great as well. We use that for some NuGet and Chocolatey and NPM configuration files. Sometimes it's easier just to have a well-known file than to do a lot of file manipulation, and this is great for that. You can also, if you have file content, let's say a text file, and you wanted to tokenize it with some dynamic content, you can load that content and then perform using the Otter script eval. You can evaluate those token replacements, those variable replacements. And then Rafts, which I mentioned earlier, and they contain the scripts, the templates, and the files. And there's different types. So out of the box, you're going to be running on a database Raft, which is just stored in the SQL database that you're connected to with your Otter instance. By default, it's going to be a SQL Express database. Those are good because they're default, they're fast. They're also backed up with any database backup plan you would have, so that's handy. There's also a file system Raft, which is more basic. You're not going to get revision control just like the database one, but it's easy to manipulate outside of Otter. It's just a location on the file system. And then finally, you have Git Rafts, which are excellent because they provide a version history for your assets, and you can do things like branch, standard Git operations. In our production instance of Otter, we are using a Git Raft. There's been multiple instances where having that version history has really helped us quite a bit when we made a mistake, but we weren't sure what happened. So, drift detection and remediation. As I mentioned, configuration plans are executed every hour. There's two phases. There's a collection phase and a configure phase. I think this is a fairly standard thing within things like DSC and desired state types of configuration. So basically, any resources that aren't in the expected state during the collection phase they're now considered to be drifted. As you see in this picture, it's you get an alert that says, hey, this configuration is drifted, and depending on how you set up your server, whether auto remediates or manually remediate, or report only, basically. If it's auto remediate, once the collection phase has executed, then the configure phase will run, and all of the scripts and steps will be executed to remediate that. Okay, so demo. So real quick demo here. So this is the demo Otter instance. This is not a production one. So currently we can, this is the servers page. This is generally your default page. The home page looks like this. This shows you the current state of your system. The green means it's good to go. Gray just means it's unknown. There hasn't been an execution on it. So if we go to our servers, look at what we're looking at is this build agent. So you can see that this server has 3 roles. It has a PowerShell packages role, an NPM packages role, and a Chocolatey packages role. And so if we go into this agent and take a look at his configuration, we can see his previous run, which was executed at 9:51. it's telling us what the state was. So at that point in time, these chocolatey packages were in the expected state, and these were using the built-in chocolatey package installer provided with Otter as an extension. And then these are executed using our custom PowerShell scripts to install PowerShell modules and to install NPM packages on the agent. If we want to go further detail, we can click into here, and we can see that indeed there was a drift detection during this execution. The whole execution took 29 seconds. So if we scroll down, it's going to be sort of a hierarchy of, so we can collapse these things. That is the collection phase up here. Now if we look in the execution logs, we can see the, I think it looks like I have an error in the NPM package. So that NPM packages did not install. The PowerShell packages did install. So basically what we see during the configure or collection phase, excuse me, is that it looks like this particular PowerShell module is not installed. So it returns a non-zero exit code, -55 in this case. And same with the rest of these assets. Now, if we look at the configure phase, so these looks like these all completed successfully. So let's go ahead and we can force a run on this, and let's just see what happens. So if we click check configuration, okay, now it's just took a little time to refresh. Okay, so now we're getting some drift. I had previously uninstalled those packages. That's why we're seeing drift here. So I'm just gonna, we can go ahead and look at the real-time status of this. So in this view, basically you're seeing the status as it's going through and checking the packages and installing, and it's gonna give you a real-time output down here. So here we're seeing drift detecting. Okay, now we're seeing an NPM get installed. We're installing this stack frame package. Still running. And all of these packages are coming from our internal ProGet server. We've found that using ProGet for all of our binary packages has been really useful, especially for hosting an internal NPM feed has been really good for our UX team. They've really enjoyed being able to create shared UI components across our teams. And that's really facilitated having ProGet and with Otter to deploy those packages to the build servers have been really good. I guess that's doing some good work there. Okay, had an error. So I don't think I've ever installed this particular NPM package. So, okay, it's always interesting trying new things like that. But errors are part of the game too. So, having errors is a good thing to sort of show how you would look for errors and diagnose. As you can see, the logs are quite verbose. So, diagnosing errors is not very, very hard. You get the full, stack outputs from your PowerShell scripts or wherever you are. In this case, you can see this is the NPM error output. Yeah, it looks like a certificate issue. That's okay. I think we're gonna have the same issue for all those NPM packages, unfortunately, and it's taking some time. Okay, let's go back to the build agent. So if we look at the configuration, we can see what it's doing though from this level. We can see that these chocolatey packages are still drifting and pending. It's still working on this last error stack parser package. The other PowerShell packages have been installed successfully. Those are up to date. And as soon as this NPM one finishes, then these chocolatey ones will go ahead and install. Apologize for the delay on that. But while it's doing that, one thing I did want to show is the just the assets part, you know, how the PowerShell scripts look. So if we take a look at that, for instance, install NPM package for user. NPM likes to install for users, not really system-wide. So we kind of had to do some customizations to, because by default we run as local system, and this sort of allows us to install packages for a targeted user, because in our build environment we're running as a specific user. But anyway, this is kind of there's a built-in editor. It's a decent little editor that gives you enough, code highlighting and things like that. Let's see if this package, there we go. So the NPM package finished. Now we're moving on to the chocolatey packages. So those probably won't take as long, I don't think. And let's take a look at, then the other thing is we're using is templates. So you'll see this is basically what you're seeing here is this is the Otter script that is the template for installing a NPM package. And it's using at the core this PS ensure. Okay, it looks like this is a bit of a digression, but over the time. So this is basically what an Otter script looks like. So there's a visual mode, so it's fairly convenient. You can do things like, you can drag and drop your different statements in, and it prompts you for variables, but you can toggle back and forth between text mode, which I think is quite excellent, because you can always get this high-level graphical view that sort of simplifies it, but then when you need to just copy, like I want to copy and paste this, real easy to do. So I do appreciate how they have done that. And that's it. So the drift has been remediated. All the modules are installed. And if we come back to the servers, now this is in a current state. So that is drift remediation. Oops. Okay. So given that, often what I've found, I've gone through several iterations of different tooling. I've gone through testing out some of the big players in the infrastructure as code market, and trying to get buy-in has been challenging from key players in the company. So I would recommend a skunkworks project. The nice thing about Otter is that there's you can get a demo. You can get, it runs in a free mode, which is limited in terms of authentication capabilities, and a few other things, but you can run in free mode. So it's great to start up a skunkworks project to start providing value. You start a skunkworks project that can start provide value on, valuable systems that are a little bit maybe lower visibility. We started on our build agents, which it's about I think 14 build agents and plus the server, which has been a great opportunity to create consistency across our servers without causing too much difficulty for other people, other IT and stuff. They don't need to necessarily worry about it. So yeah, start with low visibility systems, developer desktops. That's another good one, because if you can provide value for onboarding, when you have to onboard a new developer, making sure they have the exact tool set you need, works great for that. Just be patient. Progressively add automation over time as you need to do a change to a server, instead of going in and clicking on each server, I recommend just trying to add it to the Otter server. Add your test and your remediate steps. I would always recommend aiming towards auto remediation. I think that's going to be your best bang for the buck when your systems auto remediate. Yeah, and just keep demonstrating value to others by quickly upgrading software, by creating consistent drift-resistant systems, by creating clear, organized, and cohesive infrastructure automation. So yeah, I mean, for me, Otter really gives you a great organization of just your scripts and automation. I've built up huge libraries of PowerShell and scripting and things over time, and often it's just hard to find things, hard to know what something does. But I think Otter gives you that next level of visibility with your automation, organization, just the whole gamut of things, multiple server management. It's been great for that. And ultimately let others extol the virtues of the infrastructure as code implementation. Hopefully, over time you can provide enough value and make it easy enough to where non-programmers can modify systems much quicker and much less tediously than they would normally. Instead of performing an operation against 14 servers, click by click and logging in and that, you can now say, well, just add this one package ID to this array, and now that package is deployed across all your systems. But once people see that value, they will then be advocates for the implementation. And that is our webinar today. I hope I answered some questions, and if you have any other questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. But other than that, have fun automating your Windows infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. We actually have a couple questions that came in during the webinar, and I was wondering if you'd be able to do some Q&A right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our first question is about OtterScript. Was OtterScript difficult to learn? Is there a steep learning curve?
No, I don't think so. I honestly, I started focusing mostly on PowerShell and just using a few of the built-in statements, namely PS ensure, which is just give it the name of the test script, you give it the name of the collect and the name of the configure script, and so I just added those PowerShell scripts to the assets. But over time, I started, using the loops. The loop is a great structure. But again, if you look at it, if we take a look at that real quick, for instance, I want to add a loop. Well, I mean, at the simplest, it's just dragging a loop in, and you can do things like I want to loop over servers. I'm mostly, honestly, using like looping over lists. So especially for like lists of package IDs, lists of things. So it's really pretty straightforward, I would say. And just the fact that they have this drag and drop. So once I've drag and dropped that, now I can switch back over and see. Oh yeah, this. Wait, where did I put that? Oh, I canceled it. Hold on. Let me just put it in there again. Loop. Okay, servers and role. We'll just pick a role. So now if I wanted to see what that did, oh, here it is. So this is the, so now it's sort of a built-in learning through that drag and drop. You're just kind of learning some of the basics. And then if you need to know some of the like evals and things, that is available through their documentation, which is a very decent, very good documentation. So it has not been that challenging. But again, I started with PowerShell mostly, and slowly sort of picked up some of the values of these loop structures, the template structure. But yeah, I don't think it's a high bar there.
Okay. We actually have another question about OtterScript. Is there a way of storing OtterScripts in the source control repository, and then a way of using a deployment tool to deploy those scripts to Otter for execution? Sorry, that was a mouthful, but hopefully that came out.
Yes. Yeah, in terms of storing the Otter scripts, they're all stored. So they're all in your Raft. Um, so all of your role configuration plans, your server configuration plans, your templates. So for instance, this install npm packages template is in. If you're now, this assumes you're using a Git Raft, which is a built-in feature that you can use, which we use for our production servers. So yeah, those would all be source controlled. Now, in terms of deploying, I think there's a couple different options. You could, and I think the Inedo guys might have some different ways to do it too. But you could do things like when you go to deploy, you're just pointing to a different branch. So you just switch your branch on a different Otter server. It could be the same Otter server, you switch your branch. That might be a couple ways. You could, you could automate their API. They have a rich API, so you could, REST API, so you could push the contents explicitly through scripting. So does that kind of answer your question?
I think it does.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions that have come up. What sort of drift do you commonly encounter with your servers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, we've done some of the drift enforcement we've done is simple things like etc hosts, because we found people were making modifications to the host file to accomplish certain things on the build servers, the build agents, and so that's now, if you change the etc host, don't count on it being there. Some other things would be like PowerShell, or we're not PowerShell, sorry, package versions of things. There's some packages we need a specific version. Sometimes developers within the build process itself are installing packages of a different version. So if they do that, we at least will automatically drift back to this expected version. So I think there's version drift on things. Let me think what else we experience for drift. Just environment variables. If a developer is setting an environment variable that deviates from what we expect, which has happened, it can cause problems for the rest of the builds, the rest of the teams, because we have probably 8 teams using the same build infrastructure, so it has to be very consistent and expected. And when you're running the build, you actually have carte blanche on the, in terms of rights on the build system itself. So it's actually, in a build environment, it's very useful for ensuring that those consistent packages and build libraries are the same. And we've seen drift there. But yeah, so there's a few areas. But mostly, of the big win, even if you don't see drift, I think is just the consistency across all your servers.
Awesome. And I think we actually have time for one more question. And there was one related to actually the demo, actually where the npm package failed to install. In the demo, does it say the configuration is current even though the npm packages failed to install?
Good question. Yeah, that yes. So that this should have, if it was functioning properly, this should have been in an error state, and I think it's probably my automation that is swallowing an error somewhere. So that I would put the blame squarely on me. That's not really an Otter issue. So that is, yeah, I probably need to review that script, because that could actually be a legitimate issue. False positives and false negatives. Those are always two things you're battling with. False positives, I think, sometimes are worse. In this case, like you would now expect, well, because it's all green, I had this error. So at this point in time, I would go and look into my script and figure out what am I doing wrong here. Probably, what it is. Sorry, I'm like real-time debugging here, but if I look at the template in the npm packages, I am you see here, I'm looping over this NPM package list, and I have a try catch. This is an Otter script try catch. And what I did, there's probably some reason for this. Instead of throwing, I'm warning. And so this is what the issue is now. So if I took this try catch out, we would fix the problem. So chalk it up to bad programming on my part. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and we also appreciate you showing how to debug real quick there. That's another good benefit.
Sure.
Well, with that in mind, I think we're pretty much at our time. So I'm going to take presenter over here again. So first off, I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. We will be posting this on YouTube, so if you'd like to share that with anybody who was unable to attend. Also, we'll be following up in a day or two with a survey about this presentation and about Otter in general. And we'd really appreciate that if you can fill it out. It literally will take like 2 or 3 minutes. If you're looking to try out Otter, I want you to head over to the Otter page and download and get the latest version today to get started. And of course, a big thanks to Mark Johnson for being here with us today. So thanks a lot, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you later.